Weather portion of Ag Week now. Talking about soil moisture, an interesting little fact about soil moisture is that it's actually not that easy to get a good determination of where soils are wet and dry. There are lots of different ways, but they mean different things. And it's not just a very easy thing to do. We can measure the soil moisture in spots, but that's fairly sporadic. We don't have a lot of soil moisture measuring kits all over the world. And the other thing is, so how else do you do it? Precipitation, ongoing precipitation, past precipitation. What is it that makes an area dry? Well, this is an experimental product, a fairly new one, and it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's been developed by the University of Washington, and it's called the surface water model. And what it actually is doing is it's taking a look at the amount of surface water. It's based on recent rainfall, it's based on soil measurements and a few other things. And the scale is basically this. Wherever you see white, we're going back to all the way back to 1916. We're somewhere between the 30th and the 70th percentile of what we typically would see for soil moisture. When you start getting into these yellows and these browns, and especially the dark brown and the red, now we're up in like the 5th percentile. So, for example, right here in Stutzman and Kidder County in eastern North Dakota, it's pretty dry. It's pretty wet down here around Sioux Falls, northwest Iowa, up through central Minnesota. That's that area right in through here, which basically was the storm track this winter. A lot of snowfall in this region, very little moisture from snow, and so far not a lot of rain across much of North Dakota, northern South Dakota, and northwest Minnesota. But do bear in mind that it is still just April. Average annual moisture doesn't really start usually kicking in until May. Last year we were very dry in the spring, and then May happened, and a lot of the area, especially in North Dakota, actually became quite wet and stayed that way for much of the summer based on May. So it's a little early to panic yet. Forecast for this week, fairly dry, fairly mild across the northern plains. Looks stormy weather again across the south. The southwest, California, southern California, may be looking at some moisture this week. This will be thunderstorms, maybe some snow up north of the Great Lakes, and as I said, generally pretty dry across most of the northern plains for this week. Second week, now this is interesting. The models are suggesting some moisture into the northern plains. Pacific Northwest looks wet next week. Southwest back to its typical dry for the middle to latter part of April. Stormy weather in the mid-south, and a distinct possibility, if the models are correct, of a chance at some cold rain or wet snow in some parts of the northern plains. But this time of year, forecasting is extremely difficult. It has been said April forecasting, in fact, is probably the hardest of the year.